episode 52 in Heintz Sight. It is Thursday, February 3rd, and we're back for some content this week. Another episode into the IHS podcast, folks. As always, thank you for tuning in, taking the time out of your day to listen to this show. I know we haven't really been around this week, like I mentioned last week, and as I feel like I mention every week, is that sometimes I have to adjust the schedule, sometimes I have to maneuver things or do certain days that maybe might not be a part of the set schedule, because obviously I kind of have the set days as Monday, Tuesday, Friday, Saturday, but with other, what's the word I'm looking for? Other commitments, sometimes things happen in life, stuff like that. You know, maybe those certain days might not work, and I have to kind of find a different day or something like that to record, things of that nature. So, I know we usually don't do shows on Thursday, but here we are Thursday because I'm not going to be able to do a show Friday. So, we're going to do it today. But thank you, everybody, for tuning in. Follow me on Facebook at In Heintz Sight. I post updates on the channel when things are uploaded. So if you guys want to follow that, keep up to date with certain posts, things of the channel, feel free to do that. You guys can follow me on Twitter at Nate_Heintz. I'm actually one follower away from there on 600 followers. So, I guess that's kind of cool. And Instagram as well, Nathan_Heintz. Again, just kind of if you guys want to keep up with things in the channel or even interact with me, feel free to do so. It's another rainy day here in Pittsburgh, man. Actually, these last couple days, it's actually been hasn't really been too cold, but today, with it rainy, factor in wind chill, it's pretty cold out today. So, that time, the snow is pretty much melted for the most part, so we still got a little ways away till spring. Punxsutawney Phil, Groundhog Day was yesterday, and I believe he saw his shadow or whatever the hell it was, and we have about 6 more weeks of winter weather. So, cheers to that. But, you know, I'm honestly ready for baseball, man. I'm ready for sunny days and double plays. That's what I'm ready for. If you guys know, if you know, you know. But anyway, I think who knows when baseball season's even going to start with this lockout. I actually talked about that last week. If you guys want to go check out that podcast of just kind of going over what's going on with the MLB lockout, when to maybe expect some progress. Excuse me. And that was uploaded last week. You guys can check that out. But I'm ready for some baseball, man. I'm ready for kind of that time of the year. I'm not a big summer person, simply just because I hate hot weather. But I'm ready for certain things that happen during the summertime and all that kind of jazz like that. So we'll see. But on this show, we have some news I want to talk about, and as a Steeler fan, this is kind of what it's going to be centered around. And I there's a couple other things I'm going to talk about too outside of the Steelers. But as you guys know, this channel, as a Steeler fan, as a fan of Pittsburgh sports, we talk about those things here. We also talk about everything else that isn't associated with just Pittsburgh sport topics. So, but kicking off the show, I want to talk about some things that have been gaining attention for the Pittsburgh Steelers. So, there's been, I don't know if you want to call it the Senior Bowl. I don't know, whatever the heck you want to call it. But it's kind of the certain players that are going to be entering the NFL draft. Not every player, just certain players that are seniors, I guess, or whatever. Anyway, they've been having workouts these last couple days in, I believe, Alabama. And 2 guys that have been kind of talked about for the Steelers with Ben Roethlisberger retiring. 2 guys that have been talked about in terms of that could be linked to the Steelers, that they could have their eye on these guys, that could be fits. is Pittsburgh quarterback Kenny Pickett and Liberty quarterback Malik Willis. Now, both these quarterbacks are pretty different in their own skill set, in their own ways. But Kenny Pickett was kind of the talk of the town on Tuesday when Mike Tomlin and Matt Canada and Kevin Colbert, Brandon Hunt, guys like that were there in attendance to watch him. He took time and talked with them. Kenny Pickett himself said that it would be a dream to be drafted by the Steelers because Pittsburgh is second home. Obviously, the Steelers know him better than probably any team in the NFL simply because he went to Pitt. Pitt plays at Heintz Field. He's in the facility all the time. He's like in their backyard, basically. So he was kind of talked about, if the Steelers would be interested, if the Steelers would draft him. So there's kind of a lot of fanfare going around, and it kind of has been, but picking up on Tuesday, things like that, kind of got people talking. So, but that's no kept secret that the Steelers have shown interest in Kenny Pickett. I can't really sit here and say that I know their thoughts on him, but again, they know him better than any other NFL franchise out there, so they were there to see him Tuesday as well as some other guys. Malik Willis from Liberty was another guy that had their attention on Tuesday and yesterday. Malik Willis, I guess, had the best showing out of any quarterback that was there on Wednesday. And the Steelers were, they were talking to him too and investing a lot of their time into watching him and getting to know him. I guess if you want to say scouting him, really. So Malik Willis' talk with the Steelers has been picking up, and a lot of people have been giving him a lot of praise as of yesterday in terms of really what he was showcasing. And he's definitely somebody to keep an eye out in terms of being able to skyrocket up the draft boards. So Malik Willis is definitely kind of different in his own way where he's not like, I guess there's some people that I don't want to say compare, but who have, I don't want to say compare, but have kind of linked him maybe to a Lamar Jackson-esque kind of player. But I think most people who are familiar with Malik Willis realize that's not really the case at all. I mean, sure, Malik Willis can run the ball, but he doesn't, that's not really the focal point I necessarily think about his game. I think when it comes to passing, I think Malik Willis has a little bit more touch on his passes. I think he has a little bit more arm strength. Malik Willis does have that mobility factor to him. Now, being a mobile quarterback doesn't necessarily mean that running has to be a big part of your game. Mobile can mean guys that can buy some time, guys that can be a little shifty, can move around, make a play if need be. So Malik Willis is somebody who can kind of do those things. Now, I think Malik Willis is also a guy that probably isn't really linked to start week one. I think a lot of people have said that they think that he has the most upside, the most potential out of any quarterback in the draft. Not necessarily saying he's the best guy day one going into the draft, but that he's the guy that can be the biggest boom out of anybody. And from certain things I've seen of him, I mean, he could definitely make plays on the run. He can make throws on the run. He's definitely got a good arm down the field. Seems like maybe there's certain accuracy things there to work on, maybe, or I don't really know how I want to word it. Maybe not necessarily accuracy, but maybe more, like I said, he's kind of got some good touch on his ball, pretty pinpoint on passing, but maybe just being more prolific in terms of that. So I don't know. I mean, he could definitely be somebody. If this is going to continue to grow with him, he can definitely be somebody that maybe you see Washington take at 12. I believe that's their pick, 12, right? 11 or 12, something like that. So that could definitely be a thing. Maybe Carolina at 6. I don't know. Oh, sorry, I accidentally hit my microphone. Maybe Carolina at 6. I really don't know. But Malik Willis was the talk of the quarterbacks yesterday because he had the best showing out of everybody. And, he can definitely be someone to look out for as maybe being the number one quarterback taken in the first round. Now, we know this isn't one of the strongest quarterback classes in the sense of guys that are entering the draft, guys that you can kind of look at and be like, yep, these guys are, potential franchise guys, things like that. But that doesn't necessarily mean, to put a lot of stock into that. I mean, these can still be, you never know. Like, guys, if, let's say 3 quarterbacks go in the first round, which I think probably will. Malik, Willis, Kenny Pickett, and probably Matt Corral will probably go in the first round. Out of those 3 guys, you never know. I think it really just kind of comes down to what they show leading into the draft, traits. A lot of teams like to lean on these, guys' certain traits, really what they're strongest in, and if they feel like that these guys are really worth taking at whatever position, whatever draft spot you're at. But even though that this isn't really necessarily the strongest draft class in terms of maybe stardom, in terms of guys that, can really be factored into being a franchise caliber guy, but these are still guys that are probably worthy of being taken in the first round, and that's got to say something, right? And the fact that these guys still had successful years in college. Kenny Pickett, was the best quarterback in college football, had an incredible leap. Really his first 3 years, he was just kind of an average quarterback, and had an incredible leap his senior year. That speaks a lot. And a guy like Malik Willis as well. Sure, there's, maybe some, he had some roadblocks there toward the end of his college season last year. But still, he showed a lot of good traits. He showed a lot of things that he is capable of doing. And, that's why, sure, he probably won't be, maybe it might be like a Trey Lance situation with him. But things are there. Skill set is there, So it might be something, maybe for him, maybe it might be something, whatever team takes him, you need to take a little time to bring those things out of him, right? Matt Corral wasn't a senior this year, but Matt Corral has some certain traits to him that teams could definitely like as well, and might be in a situation as well where teams, you got to kind of get those things out of him. I don't know. I feel like Kenny Pickett's probably the best option to be a starter the first week of the season, just simply because of what he has, what he's already done, and probably already where he's at in terms of playing, what he's shown that he's capable of doing, I think kind of surpasses the other 2, at least in my opinion. But I don't know. I think, but as I was saying, sure, this isn't the best quarterback class. This isn't one of the strongest suits in terms of quarterbacks being available, but the fact that 3 still are projected first-round guys, that still speaks a lot for itself. I think all 3 definitely have potential in their own regard. How many times do we see quarterback classes that are projected as a strong quarterback class? How many of those quarterbacks even work out? So really, at the end of the day, you don't know with guys, regardless from round 1 to round 7, you don't know. And, sure, like I'm saying, this draft class might not have those guys that stick out as guys that are ready to play right away, or guys that are really viewed in high regard. But still, those 3 quarterbacks still had successful college seasons, still are viewed in a highly regarded way, being first-round guys. And maybe for a couple of them, it might take some time to bring some things out, but that doesn't mean that they can't hit that potential. They can't hit that ceiling, right? So, I think for me as a Steeler fan, I like Kenny Pickett. I do. I think he's got a lot of good traits. Malik Willis has a lot of good traits. Matt Corral, I think, is the least out of the 3. But I would not be surprised if the Steelers at 20, and it really depends. Once we see what they do in free agency, is going to be a lot telling in terms of maybe what direction they're going to go in the draft. And that goes with really all teams, I think, for the most part. But if the Steelers decide to take Kenny Pickett or Malik Willis, I hope the reason isn't just because to take a quarterback because we don't have anybody else. If they take one of these guys, they got to really like them. They got to love them. And I don't doubt the organization in terms of doing that, you know? So, if it's me as a Steeler fan, if they would take one of those guys, I would be okay with it. I would. It's hard itself to find quarterbacks that turn into guys that are going to lead a franchise for 15 plus years and bring success to that organization. That's not an easy thing to come across. I think in today's world of the NFL, in today's world of sports, I think it is easier to find, I think, better talent than maybe what it was X amount of years ago, simply just because of the transition of athletes and athleticism and what guys are capable of doing compared to before. It's a different world in sports than where it was 10 years ago, 20 years ago. So, if the Steelers do draft a guy this year, if they draft Kenny Pickett, Malik Willis, Matt Corral, they gotta really love him and really like what they see. And from what I'm hearing, they really like Malik Willis. They really like Kenny Pickett. So sure, I think those options are on the table. They could go offensive line, which is probably my number one option for them. But again, it depends who's there, right? You don't just want to take somebody just to take somebody. So, I think both those options are on the table for them. I think they're the most unpredictable team in the sense of who's going to be their quarterback next year. But Malik Willis, Kenny Pickett gaining a lot of traction. And the thing with Kenny Pickett I like is that Big Ben was the perfect quarterback for the Steelers because he tough, gritty, blue collar, you know what I'm saying? He was that kind of esque guy. And I think Kenny Pickett is a little resemblant in that guy. Yes, Kenny Pickett played here for 4 years. But Kenny Pickett's a tough guy. Kenny Pickett, I think, has good size to him. I think he's definitely gritty. I think he's got grit. Fearless. You know what I mean? Like some quarterbacks, quarterbacks are tough, but there's some quarterbacks that have that grit to them that some others don't. And that's something that Big Ben had. And I think Kenny Pickett oozes some of those things too. And him and Malik Willis are definitely different. Like, sure, Kenny Pickett can kind of move around, but Malik Willis is obviously a better runner. I think Malik Willis has better arm strength. I think Kenny Pickett is a little bit more developed. I think he's a little bit more has flourished more than maybe what Malik Willis has. Probably Malik Willis, if you want to say, like, in terms of potential and upside, again, probably has the most of that out of anybody. Kenny Pickett is accurate. I think he's got a pretty pinpoint ball. So it really kind of depends just however each team views these guys, and each team will probably view them differently. But if you're the Steelers, whenever your franchise quarterback retires, it's not an easy task to be able to find somebody right away. Now, if you make a trade for somebody who's kind of already established, or obviously a free agent out there that's already established, sure. But in terms of finding your next franchise quarterback coming out of the draft, that's not an easy thing to do. Now, I think it's easier being able to find and come across some good quarterbacks than maybe what it was 10 years ago, 20 years ago. But I still think, and I think everybody will agree, it's not easy to find that franchise guy. Now, when I say franchise guy, I don't use that term loosely. When I say franchise quarterback, somebody who's the face of the franchise, somebody who is leading and is going to lead your franchise for years and years and bring success to that organization, that's a franchise quarterback to me. Now, there's good quarterbacks in the NFL, guys that might not necessarily fit that mold, because, again, that's hard to come by. But still solid guys. Still guys that can be, be successful and things like that, but might not be in that caliber. And so, yes, I think it's a little easier to maybe find quarterbacks that can be in that mold. But it's still hard to find that franchise guy. And when you look at the NFL right now, in terms of guys that are that, Patrick Mahomes, but how long did it take Kansas City to find that, right? Justin Herbert, the Chargers kind of got lucky. Going from Phillip Rivers to Justin Herbert's big. Joe Burrow has already kind of shown those things that he can be that dude. I mean, Josh Allen, Russell Wilson's that guy. I mean, he hasn't really been that great the last couple of years, but he's still been that guy. But when you look at those guys right now, how long did it take for those organizations to find those guys, right? So, not too often is it where an organization has a guy like that, and then they can immediately find the guy after that. Sometimes it takes time. A lot of times it takes time. Sometimes it takes organizations longer than others simply because those organizations are garbage and can't develop talent. I think with the Steelers, I don't think it's going to take 20, 25 years to find the next guy since after Big Ben, like how it did from Terry Bradshaw to Big Ben. It's a different world now. I don't think it's going to take that long. And I think as well, simply because the Steelers organization, compared to other ones, the Steelers grow their teams through the draft. Steelers develop talent, man. They know how to develop talent. They build their teams through the draft. And I think I trust them probably more than most organizations in the NFL to be able to find that right quarterback for them. Will that be this year? I don't know. Will these quarterbacks in the draft be able to be those caliber guys? I don't know. And I can say that for every year in the draft. Like some guys, you can probably say there's a high probability of it, but there's also a probability things for whatever reason don't work. You can look back at the last 10 NFL drafts from round one quarterbacks taken. How many of them ended up hitting being a franchise guy? Very, very slim amount. How many hit in terms of still being maybe a solid quarterback? Still not a big amount. So I think with the Steelers, for them to, I think even regardless of any draft, you got to love the guy. But I think particularly in this, because there isn't one quarterback, like there's no quarterback that's going to go number one or anything like that. For the 2-3 quarterbacks that are going to go in the first round, yes, there's a reason they're going to be first round picks. There's things there, right? There's traits, there's talent, there's things there. But I think for teams to take them, you gotta like them, you gotta love what you see, and there's still time between now, February 3rd, into the draft, the end of April, for teams to scout, for teams to learn more, for teams to see more. So with the Steelers, those things have kind of been heating up in terms of Kenny Pickett, Malik Willis, because they've been there the last couple days watching them perform, watching them do their workouts, things like that, which is great. I would, if they took Kenny Pickett, sure, that'd be great. I'd be okay with it. I'd be okay if they took Malik Willis. Matt Corral, But I also, if the Steelers went in a different direction of, I don't know, whether it was an Aaron, a Deshaun, a Jameis Winston, when I say Jameis Winston, somebody who can kind of keep the team competitive, I guess until, next year's draft's really big, really strong. So somebody like that, I would still be okay with that. But I think unless if you're Deshaun Watson, I don't think it's really worth the Steelers' time to trade for an Aaron Rodgers or a Russell Wilson or somebody like that, because the Steelers aren't in a position where they have positions set in stone. They need to get better at certain positions. They have certain holes at positions, specifically offensive line. And you need draft capital to build that. Now, yes, the Steelers have money to work with in free agency, which 100% they'll be active. But it just depends on what they do in free agency, and then that will transition in the draft. So I don't really think it's worth it necessarily to just sell your future to acquire Aaron for 2 years, or Russell Wilson, who's 33 and maybe on the decline. I think Deshaun Watson's probably the only guy that's worth doing that for, considering he's 25. So far in his career, he's shown he can be a franchise caliber guy. So, yeah, I mean, I think the Steelers will look in all options, all different directions. I can't sit here and tell you what they're going to do, what I think they'll do. It's too unpredictable. But in terms of going out and trading for a guy, I think the question is, it's the price, the asking price. But this isn't a situation where the Steelers were like the Rams, where they acquired Stafford and Jalen Ramsey, where the Rams really had so many positions set in stone, even guys that are staples in those positions, and even guys that are answers long term. The Rams were really just a quarterback away, and now look at them. They're in the Super Bowl. But now, see, they don't have a first-round pick for the next 3 years at least, and multiple other draft picks for the next few years at least. But see, they were ready to take that step. They just needed that piece, and that was Matthew Stafford. The Steelers aren't in that position. The Steelers aren't too far off from being a strong team, but they need to get better at certain areas. And that's why it might not really be worth going out of your way to trade for somebody who's going to be here for 2 years. So it is interesting seeing the Steelers and guys like that at Kenny Pickett and Malik Willis' workout. I mean, obviously, those things haven't really been happening because of Big Ben, and there'd be no reason to, because he's been your guy for 18 years. But now with him retired and not here anymore, they're doing their due diligence, which is great. So hopefully, if they're really intrigued and love these guys, they, by all means, then do it, But it really just kind of depends how they view them. It depends, too, how other teams view them. I mean, will these guys be there on the board by that time they pick? I don't know. So it's going to be a really interesting offseason for them. But it's exciting to kind of see those things kind of heat up. See, I guess kind of start to see the Steelers do their not start, but, out in the public eye, kind of doing their homework on life after Big Ben, I guess. So we'll see what happens there. I don't know what direction they're going to go. It's really a wait and see. Moving on, though, from that, there's one thing I want to talk about, also NFL related. Is the Brian Flores situation. If you guys are aware of Brian Flores was fired from the Miami Dolphins last month. Was the coach since 2019, so he was the coach for 3 years. And he was pretty successful for Miami. 2019, they weren't very good. Look at the roster he inherited. But in 2020, he won 10 games with them. They fell just short. It's a Tootsie Roll, by the way. They fell just short of the playoffs. This year, they started 1-7. And I believe they finished, 9-8, I think. They won 8 in a row. So, Miami has good pieces on defense. And even talent on offense. From Jalen Waddle, Devontae Parker. They have a couple guys on the offensive line. Now, Tua's a below-average quarterback. I'm not big on him at all. I don't like his arm. Injury prone. Great guy. But what Brian Flores did, and you can see it too, it seemed like players... Now, it doesn't seem like he had the connection with certain players maybe some other coaches did. And I don't necessarily think he was too collaborative with certain management and stuff like that. But he was definitely bringing a competitive nature to Miami when he got there. But with him getting fired, which again, I don't really think a lot of people understood, simply because what he was already kind of doing for the organization, even with a lack of talent, Brian Flores is suing the NFL, the Miami Dolphins, the New York Giants, and I believe the Denver Broncos for racism in terms of him interviewing for the new jobs with Denver back in 2019. The Giants this year. Miami firing him. The NFL not holding to their standard of the Rooney Rule. And also, this is the kicker I don't think gets too much, doesn't get enough coverage. He also exposed the Dolphins' own, what was his name? Stephen Jones? I believe that was his name. Let me look to clarify. I believe that was his name. Let me make sure. No, that's Cowboys. That's freaking... Hold on. Let me see here. No, not Chris Greer. Dolphins owner. What's his freaking name? Stephen Ross. Stephen Ross. Not Stephen Jones. That's Dallas. Stephen Ross. Miami's owner, Stephen Ross. This is I think, bigger than any of the other ones. The rest of the stories. Not saying in terms of alleged racism and the interviewing, hiring process, stuff like that. Stephen Jones, he came out. Brian Flores came out the other day and said that Stephen Jones, the Dolphins owner, offered him $100,000 for every game he lost back in 2019. Now, the Dolphins owner came out and denied that. But Hugh Jackson, former Cleveland Browns coach, came out after Brian Flores and said the Browns offered as well $100,000 to tank, to lose games. So that was 2017, 2018. I feel like that this is something that just isn't getting talked about enough. And if this was a player that was dropping passes for money, if this was a coach telling a player to fumble a ball, to throw an interception, to miss a tackle, I mean, out of the league, right? If this is true that Stephen Ross offered the Dolphins $100,000, or Brian Flores $100,000 for each game he lost, gotta go. That's a lifetime ban in the NFL. That's loss of draft picks. Got to go. Same thing goes for the Browns. Stripped right away. And as a fan of the NFL, as a fan of football in general, I mean, if that is true, I'm not going to sit here and say it's true or not, because who ultimately knows? But if that comes out to be true, that's just plain lack of integrity. These guys get paid to go out and compete to win games. I don't think there's players out there. I don't think there's players out there that deliberately do that. Management and these teams that know they're not probably going to compete for a little while want to be able to get the best pick they can get, because obviously it goes from, in terms of the draft order, from the worst teams to the best. It's simply them. What a knock on the integrity, the genuine competitive nature of the game, if that's the case. Absolutely shameful. Gotta be stripped. Got to be stripped. And the NBA has stripped owners before. Clippers owner, whatever the heck his name is. I can't remember his name. It's not something that can't be done. In the past, those things have happened. Owners have been stripped. Forced to resign. Forced to sell the team. Now, Flores was also accusing John Elway, the Broncos GM, in terms of showing up to the interview back in 2019 wasted from the night before, not taking the interview seriously, and just not taking him much into consideration. Now, when you look around the league, there is only one black head coach right now, considering Brian Flores was fired. Dave Coley, which there was a lot of backlash toward the Texans organization of him getting fired. The Rooney Rule, there's a reason it was put in place for teams having to interview in terms of like diversity and teams having to interview coaches of color, things like that. Now we're seeing these hires so far in the NFL, pretty much all white guys, and you can look at some coaches around the NFL that probably shouldn't even be there, and they're white, right? I'm not here to talk politics. I'm not here anything like that. I'm just giving what the facts are and why this is a problem in terms of like why it's an ongoing thing right now. There's multiple guys in the league that are black coaches that should definitely get an opportunity over certain guys. I mean, heck, dude. Texans have interviewed Josh McCown twice, who's been retired for about 4 years, hasn't coached once in the NFL. What are you talking to him for? He's coaching, and Josh McCown's a good guy, but like, he's coaching high school. Meanwhile, you have guys like Todd Bowles, who didn't work out with the Jets, but he's a great defensive coordinator. He definitely should get an opportunity somewhere else because the Jets are a failure of a franchise. At least they have been the last 20 years. They can't get anything right. Todd Bowles, Raheem Morris was up for consideration with the Vikings job, Rams DC. Patrick Graham of the Giants DC. I mean, he didn't do too bad of a job, I guess, with the Giants the last couple years. Who am I missing here? Jim Caldwell's been out of the league. I mean, yes, Jim Caldwell, he's had some success. He's had some low times in the NFL. But he's still, I think as long as he's in the right spot, he can definitely bring success to a team. Brian Flores, obviously. The list goes on. I can probably sit here and find other coordinators. Byron Leftwich, he is being talked about that he's the Jacksonville Jaguars' favorite, but nothing's really come to fruition. So, like, I understand in terms of why that's an issue, right? And there are certain guys in the NFL that are white head coaches that shouldn't even be that. Cliff Kingsbury's one of them. He's awful. Wasn't successful at Texas Tech. Terrible play caller. Has done nothing for the Cardinals. Sure, he took them to the playoffs this year, but they were absolutely awful the second half of the year and crapped the bed in the playoffs. Not a leader. Nick Sirianni, I don't really know necessarily. I can't remember where he came from. He did lead the Eagles to the playoffs this year. I mean, okay. I'm all about, when it comes to hiring head coaches, or coaches in general, I'm all about it being best man for the job. But there's a reason the Rooney Rule was put in place for all these guys to get opportunities to be talked to interviewed and things like that. But when franchises maybe don't take them seriously or overlook them, like, yeah, that's an issue. That's an issue. Eric Bieniemy from the Chiefs, I mean, I think we all thought he was probably going to get a head coaching job going into this season. It didn't happen. Maybe even the year before, and it didn't happen. Now, I don't know the behind the scenes. I don't know. But that's why it's kind of been a problem. And I think, Brian Flores is trying to expose these things. Now, he'll probably end up getting blackballed from the NFL simply because of the stance he's taking and all that kind of stuff. But Brian Flores he knows the game. And to me, he seems like a leader, a guy that would stand up for his guys from what I'm seeing, and he's standing up for what he believes in. There you go. But he'll probably end up getting blackballed from the NFL because he's taking a stand against the league. So there's that. But I think the biggest thing out of all of it that bothers me is just if these guys were paid off, I mean, goodbye. Goodbye. Gotta go. Gotta go. There was another thing I kind of wanted to talk about before I end this show. We're at about 40 minutes long. I don't like to go that long, but sometimes when you keep going on and putting your thoughts out there, sometimes it happens. What was the other thing I wanted to talk about? MLB, the lockout's still ongoing. There's nothing really to talk about. Absolutely nothing's going on because of it. I could talk about certain NBA things going on. I mean, tonight we have the Suns and Hawks and the Lakers and Clippers on TNT. Definitely be tuning into that. And I guess I can kind of briefly go into certain things with the NBA. The NBA trade deadline is definitely coming up here in about 8 days, I think. We'll see who's going to be on the move. Sometimes the NBA trade deadline can be a little wacky. Sometimes absolutely nothing happens. Now, when we look at the standings in the West, the Lakers are an absolute disaster. Absolute disaster. They're an old team. LeBron's out. Russell Westbrook has been crap all year long. He doesn't fit there. Frank Vogel, I don't understand why they hired him in the first place. He's not a good head coach. Anthony Davis is always hurt. When you look at the guys the Lakers gave up for Anthony Davis, Brandon Ingram, Josh Hart, Lonzo Ball, though he's not there anymore, I'm sure maybe you rethink, was it really worth giving that up? But obviously at the time, you had to give up what you had to give up. Do the Lakers even have anything else to give up to acquire somebody? I don't think so. I don't really think they have that much talent. Their bench is ass. So, will they trade Russell Westbrook? I don't know. Will they trade Anthony Davis? I don't know. But if you're the Lakers, considering you're 25 and 27, you're sitting in 10th place in the East or whatever, or in the West, whatever it is. Considering LeBron's 37 years old, still playing at a great level while he's playing too, you got to figure this crap out. Who knows what's going to happen there, but they're a disaster. The Phoenix Suns are number 1 in the West. I believe they're 43-9. I think that was their record last time I looked. Something like that. The Suns, they've won, I believe, 11 straight, which is a franchise record. Right now, they're better than what they were last year, which is great. And from last year, them finally being good again, getting to a finals that they haven't done since Charles Barkley days, and then you look at this year, they're kind of building off that. They're taking a leap, which is great. Now, for the trade deadline, DeAndre Ayton's had some injury problems. Cameron Payne is still out, the backup point guard. Jay Crowder did come back. They did sign Bismack Biyombo, who definitely has kind of given some life is for when those guys have been out. He's definitely made a presence there. JaVale McGee has been a pretty good bench player for them. If you're the Suns, come the trade deadline, you just got to evaluate. Though they're number 1 in the West, you have to evaluate where you're at as a team come then. If the injury issues are concerning, maybe you go out and you make a move to kind of cover your ass a little bit if something does happen again. I don't think the Suns need to go out and make a blockbuster trade. Absolutely not. Don't fix what's not broken. But if somebody gets hurt up between now and the deadline, or if it is a concern in terms of some of these guys that have been missing time, maybe you go out and you make that move. So who knows? I've seen names like Thaddeus Young. I've seen names like Robert Covington kind of be around to give them that extra depth there. I would like to see them upgrade over Jay Crowder. I don't really think Jay Crowder does much for their starting lineup. I love their starting lineup. Chris Paul just continuing to do what he does. Devin Booker, one of the better scorers in the league. Mikal Bridges definitely fits their system well. Though there's times he can be a little up and down, but he's been playing pretty good lately, and he definitely fits what they do. DeAndre Ayton is a great fit there. I just don't really see I don't really think Jay Crowder offers much in terms of being a part of the starting lineup when you compare to some of these other teams in the West, and once these teams start getting healthier, and even guys in the East, because that was the Suns' problem last year. That's why they got destroyed by Milwaukee all the time. They didn't have the size. They didn't have the physicality to match up against Milwaukee. Sure, the Suns are a faster-paced team, but they didn't have those things. And Jay Crowder isn't somebody that's like that. Jay Crowder's just a perimeter defender and a guy that will just pop a three here and there. Maybe that's something the Suns do. Miami Heat, I think they need to make a move because Kyle Lowry's still out. They don't know what's going to happen there. Jimmy Butler and Bam Adebayo's had some injury issues. I don't think Duncan Robinson's very good. I think he's probably better for a bench role, being a shooter. PJ Tucker's done pretty good in that role. I think the Heat should honestly probably make a move and upgrade and get somebody else in that starting lineup. Now, I'm not sitting here saying this because I watch the NBA all the time, or I know more than somebody who really pays attention to the whole environment of the league. But in terms of what I've been seeing lately, I think that maybe that might be something. And that's something that's been talked about, too, of the Heat making a move. And maybe they will. I don't know. Some other teams maybe, I'm trying to think here. I mean, the Clippers have injury problems. I mean, Brooklyn, does Brooklyn do something with James Harden? Does Brooklyn do something with Kyrie Irving? I don't know, because clearly it's not working there. Nothing's working there. Steve Nash is doing an awful job. It's not working. Do the Knicks do anything? Do they unload because they're a huge disappointment? I don't know. Trade deadline, 8 days away. We'll see what happens there. If anything does, I will talk about it on here. But that's going to wrap it up. Episode 52, guys, of In Heintz Sight. Thank you, each and every one of you. Went about 45 minutes here. Each and every one of you taking your time out of your day to listen to this. Hit the subscribe and the thumbs up, guys. It just really kind of helps grow the channel, because I just kind of want to keep expanding things to other sport fans of, whoever and things like that. Just fun conversation with people, good debates, stuff like that. So that'd really be appreciated. Comment in the comment section your thoughts on this episode with everything that was talked about. We'll probably be back this weekend talking about whatever might be popping up. Probably be talking about the Super Bowl next weekend. So let me know your guys' thoughts on it. I appreciate it. But that's going to be wrapped for episode 52, guys. We will see you next time. Take care, everybody. We'll probably see you this weekend.